Correct. 14 million cases, which has been registered, COVID-19 positive cases that's been registered in India, and this is the second highest, worst hit country in the world, just behind the United States. There are states like Maharashtra, which has more than 300,000 cases, and across India there is there's partial lockdowns, and businesses have been ordered to close down after 10 p.m. in the night. So the virus is spreading rapidly, and the situation is really grim. And a lot of states have complained that the central government is not cooperating with them, is not supplying the essential drugs, it's not supplying the essential supplies to contain the virus from spreading more rapidly. And as you rightly pointed out, Ramadan is here, and a lot of masjids have been shut down. But there's just masjids in the containment zone. Places where the virus has spread really badly. But across India, the masjids are open, but with a lot of restrictions. There are certain masjids where more than 50 people are not allowed to enter at any given point of time for any of the prayers. But at the same time, the Kumbh Mela, this is something that happens once in a decade. It's one of the major religious gatherings in India, not just in India, but across the world. Right now, there are more than 4 million people who have gathered in the city of Haridwar. And these are people who are taking dip, they take bath in the river. Imagine millions of people taking bath in the river at the same time. And this, when the pandemic is spreading and India is the worst hit country, this cannot be more wrong than that. In fact, just now, just today, there was news that this particular religious gathering has become what we call as a super spreader. There are more than 1,000 people who were tested COVID-19 positive just in the past 4 to 5 days in this particular place. But despite this, the government has allowed this religious gathering. At the same time, they're clamping down on masjids and restricting the number of worshippers who can be allowed in the masjid.
Yes, and I suppose these 4 million people obviously have come from various parts of India to come and attend this festival. So now when we're talking about super spreaders, there is a high risk that this could be taken. Like, we had the case initially with regard to what had happened in Nizamuddin, the Tabligh Jamaat. And, they said that all the members of the Tabligh Jamaat had gathered there and they started going out and started spreading. Now, this is exactly the same scenario that is playing out, Shaik Zakeer.
It's much worse in terms of the number of people who have gathered. Tablighi Jamaat, the Nizamuddin Markaz. The Nizamuddin Markaz in Delhi, it's a small masjid in compared to the 4 million people who have gathered here. There were at one point of time there were only a few hundred people who had gathered at the masjid, and this was at the initial stage when most of the people did not know that the pandemic has started, and many of the people had come from different parts of the world to gather. This is something that happens once in a year at Nizamuddin, and many of the people did not know this. They were given permission to gather there, but they were targeted specifically because of their Muslim identity. They were called the term that was used in the media and by a lot of politicians in India was that what the Tablighis were doing was Corona jihad. Right, so they were termed as jihadis, they were termed as anti-nationals, and they were termed as people who were responsible for spreading corona across India. And the result of this was that there was attacks against Muslims on the streets of India. There were many places across India. There were tens of cases where Muslims were beaten up. There were cases when Muslims were not allowed to enter certain housing colonies. There were cases one Muslim had to commit suicide because he was termed as a jihad. He was termed as a super spreader, and his entire family was boycotted. So this was the kind of treatment that was given out to Muslims in India at the beginning of the pandemic. And while in contrast, when you see here, when this is the second year, right? We know the consequences of the pandemic. We know how many people have died. But despite this, the religious gathering at the Kumbh Mela was allowed, and not just allowed. People are taking bath in the river. They're openly, blatantly floating the COVID-19 guidelines. And the people in the government, when they were asked, how could you just allow such a large gathering when the virus is spreading, They said that there cannot be comparison between the event that took place in Markaz Nizamuddin and what has happened here in Haridwar, because these are two different things, right? I mean, you can see this preferential treatment, the different way, the Muslims were treated, the Muslims have been treated, and the way, this particular religious gathering has been allowed to openly float the guidelines as well. So this is what's happening currently. In fact, the Markaz Nizam, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, the Markaz Nizamuddin has not been allowed to open until yesterday. It was just today that the Delhi High Court gave the orders for the masjid to be opened, and also placed a restriction of only 50 people to be gathered.
Yes. Now, looking at the Indian media, what is the Indian media saying at this point in time? Because we know they had a lot to say when it came to Nizamuddin and the Markaz.
That's correct. The Indian media was the one who coined the term COVID jihad, COVID jihad or Corona jihad. It's much of the mainstream media across India. The term that was used was Corona jihad and Tablighi jihadis, right? The members of the Tablighi Jamaat, and there is no way to identify who's from the Tablighi Jamaat, right? Most Muslims wear a beard, they wear a skull cap, so anybody and every Muslim was a target. And this is despite, within a few months of what happened, a lot of Tablighi people were actually arrested in India. There were sedition cases that was put against members of the Tablighi Jamaat. There were murder cases that were registered against the Tablighi Jamaat only for the fact that they had gathered in the masjid for prayers. This was the only reason. And last year, I think in the month of August, many of them were acquitted by the court. And the court, I think this is one of the landmark judgments. The Mumbai High Court, the Bombay High Court, they said that the treatment that was given to the Tablighi Jamaat, the way it was portrayed in the media, they called it as persecution. And they said that this was propaganda specifically used against the Tablighi Jamaat. So this was a direct indictment from the court against the way the media portrayed it, against the way the politicians and the government itself portrayed it. There was propaganda used against them. There were lies that were concocted against them. The media told that the Tablighi Jamaat, the members of the Tablighi Jamaat were spitting, and they were spitting and spreading the virus, which was not the case. It was turned out that the cases were false. They also said that they were not cooperating with the doctors, which was also false. Some of the doctors were caught lying against the Tablighi Jamaat. They also said that the Tablighi Jamaats were running naked. This was also turned out to be false. You can just imagine the kind of vicious propaganda that was used against the Tablighi Jamaat, as in specific, but towards Muslims in general, right? But in contrast, today, every day, the religious gathering in Haridwar, the Kumbh Mela, is being celebrated in the media. The same, media which was targeting Muslims is now celebrating and is relaying every day live stories of what is happening and the significance of it, and the spirituality that is connected to it, the story that's connected to it. That's the way the media is going on.
Well, certainly, and I think, all the allegations and the accusations that were made against the Tabligh Jamaat, when you're talking about spitting, when you're talking about people running around naked and those type of things, I can just imagine what is taking place at the Kumbh Mela festival right now, Shaik Zakeer.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they are half naked, right? Many of them are not even wearing clothes, because there are certain sects among the Hindus. They take bath only during the Kumbh Mela. I mean, this is a fact. People can check it out, and they take a dip in the river without any clothes. Right, so these are the Aghoras. I mean, there are certain sects among the Hindus, they do that, but that is not being shown in the media. That is not that's not been shown as flaunting COVID-19 guidelines. It's actually been encouraged in a way. A lot of politicians are going and taking a dip in the river along with the other people who have gathered there. And the chief minister of that particular state also said that there can be no comparison because these are two different things. And he made a ridiculous, unscientific statement that as long as people are in the open, he said that Markaz Nizamuddin was a closed area, and there's more possibility of a virus spreading in a closed area than in an open area. That was the reason that he gave. So when it comes to Muslims, the way Muslims are treated, the way the masjids have been closed on, or at least restrictions have been put on the masjids. It's very different than the way, it's very open, and they're absolutely fine. They're very blatant about it. They're blatant about the discrimination, and that's the image that they want to portray as well, that Muslims will be treated this way in this country.
Well, Shaik Zakeer, Jazakallah khairan so much for that and for your time with us once again on Salam Media on the Iftar Drive. And we wish you a wonderful Ramadan, inshallah, whatever is left for the month of Ramadan. Allah grant you, Allah accept you for during this month of Ramadan, and all the wonderful work and effort that you put in through the Cognate as well.
Thank you so much, Inad Bhai, and thank you so much for the listeners, and Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. Ameen.
So it was Shaik Zakeer Hussain joining us this afternoon, and that was our international story that we had to, we were looking at this afternoon, and very, very interesting to see how selective the Indian government has been as far as the Muslims are concerned in the treatment of Muslims during this COVID-19 pandemic. The time is just headed straight for 4:31. We come back, we're going to have the Asar Azan, and we're also looking at our tribute to Muslim broadcasters and journalists in this afternoon. We'll be joined by Safira Kaka from CII.